Are you an overwhelmed SaaS founder ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where finishing the year strong isn't about hustle. It's about reflection, clarity, and finally admitting last year's goals were wildly optimistic. Anybody else ever feel that way? Like, wow, we shot really, really high for that one. Well, I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. How many deals have quietly stalled? Not because your product wasn't good enough, but because security became the awkward pause no one knew how to address. For a lot of growing companies, compliance feels like something you deal with later, right up until an enterprise buyer asks for documentation and the sales momentum just evaporates. Well, in this episode, we dig into why trust, not features, is often the real bottleneck in B2B growth, especially at the enterprise level, and how security compliance can flip from a growth killer into a sales unlock. You'll hear why treating compliance as an afterthought stretches procurement cycles, frustrates buyers, and leaves founders scrambling, and how building it into your product early changes the entire sales conversation. One of the greatest decisions you'll make, I can guarantee you that. We also explore how AI is reshaping the compliance game, turning what used to be a slow, painful process, and we started when it was, and now he's turned it into something far more lightweight, automated, and founder friendly. From creating audits and documentation in days instead of months, to building a public facing trust center that answers buyer questions before they even ask. This episode shows how transparency can quietly accelerate deals. If you're trying to scale without drowning in red tape, balance speed with discipline, and make trust a competitive advantage instead of a hurdle, this conversation will completely reframe how you think about security, sales, and sustainable growth. On a special Christmas episode last Thursday, I went solo to distill the top 10 most valuable takeaways from all 104 episodes throughout 2025. No guests, no fluff, just hard-earned lessons and resources pulled from conversations with founders, operators, and experts who are in the arena making things happen. And of course, at the end, we have the SaaS Fuel Growth Accelerator Toolkit. Includes 10 resources, things that we pulled from client-only material, some of the best stuff, condensed down so you can get immediate results and actions, all designed for action. And that is available in the show notes, and that'll be available through the 15th, and then it goes back into the vault and client-only again. From 700 pages down to about 20 of super, super powerful stuff. And that was our gift to you from the Christmas episode. Then before that, our founder on Tuesday before Christmas was Jason Friedman, co-founder and CEO of the Radical Company. He delivered a powerful masterclass on building soul-aligned businesses that scale with meaning. Drawing from a life that spans touring with Rush and Peter Gabriel, building and exiting 5 companies, and surviving cancer, Jason shared how lived experience becomes customer magnetism. He shared frameworks like the power of one, the radical method, and showed founders how to fuse purpose with performance without losing either one. If you missed either one of those episodes, go back and give it a listen, and especially grab that toolkit, the SaaS Fuel Growth Accelerator Toolkit. So much good stuff in there. We've never done anything like this before, stuff that we've never shared outside of clients. And I'm really a little bit surprised we did it and also really excited. So this was an idea that was boiling up for a little while. I was like, let's just do it. So really excited. So grab a copy of that and be sure to share the episode as well. Super helpful to do that, and the best time to do it because whoever you send it to is going to think that you're a genius. You're like the hero. She gave them all the stuff. So awesomeness. My guest today is Varun Jain, founder of ComplyJet, an AI-native trust management platform built to help startups clear one of the biggest hidden blockers to growth. Can you guess what it is? Security compliance. Man, If you've got it, it's an accelerator, and if you don't, it's a blocker. Varun's mission is simple but critical, and that is to help B2B SaaS founders unlock sales by turning trust into a competitive advantage, not a bottleneck. Has built and scaled products across conversational AI, enterprise workflow automation, e-commerce, and financial services. He's seen firsthand how long procurement cycles and security demands can stall momentum. Because these days, compliance isn't just a checkbox, it is a sales unlock. Welcome someone helping founders move faster because of security, not in spite of it. Varun Jain. Hi, Varun. Welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me here.
Well, you've worked across e-commerce, AI, and enterprise SaaS. What was the aha moment that led you to start ComplyJet and dive into security compliance?
There were actually a couple of things. At Instabase, I was building products for very large enterprises. We had to go through very long procurement cycles where security and compliance was at the forefront of that procurement process. And sometimes that would take a few months as we were dealing with the risk and IT teams of these large banks and insurance companies. In addition to my work at Instabase, I love helping other founders. And I was an active investor in more than 50 different early stage companies. And I saw a
Wow.
lot of them were also going through similar issues around procurement related to security and compliance. And a lot of the security compliance has to do with figuring out your evidence across your technology, your HR policies, and your risk management. And I believed that using AI, we could take a fresh take on it, especially for early stage teams. And that was the genesis of starting ComplyJet. We have been building for about a year and focused on solving the problems for early stage founders.
So good. I think trust is a big blocker for
Mhm.
B2B sales, and you kind of talked a little bit about that in just how the procurement process.
Mhm.
Why do you think security compliance is such an overlooked sales unlock for startups?
The cloud delivery model has been amazing for the founders. It has reduced the complexity of building a company in the first place, but it brings
Yeah,
a fundamental question for all of your buyers and prospects. What are you going to do with my data if I am using your software service, which you have
right.
hosted over a public cloud? And as a result, a lot of these security and compliance questions have to do with what are your practices in securing my customer data if I'm going to trust your service. And unlike a lot of advice on how to build a company, how to find product market fit, how to validate ideas with your early customers, there is just not enough conversation about this very important part of the buying process. I believe that any founding team, even while they're validating their ideas, should understand, hey, what does my security posture need to be in order to pass muster with some of my early customers? And this is definitely a crucial aspect when you're looking to scale the company after early PMF. And we are doing our part in having more conversations about it and bringing this from a boring, unsexy, overlooked topic to something which is very important to the success of any SaaS team out there.
Yeah. I think a lot of founders think if they're using one of the big cloud providers, a lot of the security stuff is taken care of.
Mhm.
But I think there's two sides. One, some of it is for sure, but there's a lot of things in how we configure our own stuff that are still security concerns, and there's still our own audit process to go through.
Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. Going through one of these security audits a decade ago was a nightmare. And
Yes.
that's how some of these security frameworks have gained these notoriety. People believe they have to spend 100K and go through a 6 month hell in order to become SOC 2 compliant. Because when you did not have a public cloud or you were not using Git hosting, figuring out all of the requirements of these frameworks was an actual challenge and a massive amount of work. As you pointed out, you get a massive amount of goodness by using a public cloud and Git hosting. Still, you need to configure a few things like encryption, logging, firewalls, and what are some of the best practices inside your Git hosting. In addition, these frameworks also touch upon some good aspects around your hiring policies. How do you manage access in your teams? How do you manage the risk inside your own vendor base? And those things, you have to get them right, even outside of your technology. And therefore, it does require some amount of effort. But using the tools which are out there now, I think that process has become much simpler than it used to be. And it does not have to burn a massive hole through your pocket.
I like that. I remember the early days of compliance. We've been doing PCI and SOC 2,
Mhm.
HIPAA. I mean, probably 12 years. And in the early days, it was an absolute nightmare. It was 6 months of hell,
Yeah.
and the team hated it. And audit time seemed like it never ended because
Mhm.
as soon as we were done with one, it was time to start all over again and do it for the next year. How does
Yeah.
ComplyJet solve that and make it where it is less painful?
Absolutely. Our learning is that most of the early stage founders on their teams are not experts in security and compliance. As a result, there is a lot of need for education and support in this area. We are over investing in that by making sure that our AI copilot is able to answer any question you have. You do not have to run to some implementation partner or a DevOps expert to answer your questions. Second, there are a lot of artifacts that you need to create. For example, your security policies, creation of a risk register to cover basic risk scenarios, and conduct things like access reviews or vendor reviews. Now it is possible to create a lot of these artifacts using our own AI agents at ComplyJet. We recommend people to always review these artifacts to make sure that they pass muster and there is not any critical mistake which will compromise their security or audit subsequently. The third aspect is also about making sure that we have the right processes and the auditor network, which is optimized for these early stage companies. The needs of a mid sized company or an enterprise company with their security is very, very different from when you are early in the process. And we are just going very deep on that segment and making sure that every process of ours, the auditors we bring in our network are really optimized for that. So, in addition to using AI to reimagine every workflow, it's also about having the right process to make sure that we are able to cut the time, the effort, and the uncertainty. Because a lot of the anxiety, as you mentioned, came from, oh, there is another back and forth with the auditor, or we do not know what to expect. And that's the pain as the amount of effort required.
Makes a lot of sense. At what point does it become so automated that we end up internally kind of relaxing our security posture and just assuming that the tools have it, and then it becomes a check the box exercise instead of true security?
That's a great question. This is something that I hear especially from our technical partners, technical co founders, and CTOs who go through this exercise. A lot of them are just looking to check the box and make sure that their VP of sales or their sales co founder is happy that they can push their deals through the pipeline. And we both know how important that is as
Sure.
serial founders. When people are implementing some of the things, for example, making sure that all of your devices have endpoint protection, are you looking at doing the access reviews in the right way? A lot of the technical founders tell me that they're very happy that they at least have some of these processes in place, and it throws up the checks for when something goes wrong. In addition to preparing you for first time compliance, the platforms like ComplyJet also are monitoring your infrastructure on a continuous basis. What that means is that as you're expanding your company rapidly, the resources in your cloud or your repo may increase a lot over time. Similarly, on the team, some people will join and some folks will move away. And therefore, being able to monitor these things in an automated manner without having dedicated security and compliance team is actually really beneficial to teams who are growing very, very fast. It becomes a compliance monitoring tool in addition to getting you ready for the audit and getting you that audit report. So that aspect is something that people do not talk enough about.
That's really important because it's one thing to go through an audit and okay, we're compliant at one point in time, we've proven that we
Mhm.
followed our processes and that kind of thing. But then environments change, especially if the company is growing. And I mean, new things are being added all the time.
Yeah,
So just because you're compliant and secure today doesn't mean you will be tomorrow. And so
absolutely.
that monitoring aspect is there.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest ones, I mean, you just mentioned it, is just the number of logins.
Mhm.
We have so many different logins to different systems, and it's pretty easy to forget, especially if you have people going in and out regularly, to disable all those. I mean, I can't tell you how many times on a 90-day audit we're looking back over the users or admins and like, oh, I forgot to remove somebody from that system.
Absolutely.
Oops.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch how many of the CTOs have an oops moment even while they're
Yeah.
preparing for an audit. A lot of the founders are using offshore development teams all the time, and it allows you to manage all of these contractors in a really easy manner. The other challenge is a lot of people are trying to optimize their cloud costs. The funding environment is not as easy as it was a few years ago. And
Right.
therefore, a lot of teams are really keeping a hawk eye on their cloud costs. And that's another area in which a lot of mistakes can happen easily when you're moving your assets across different clouds, or some of our customers are even looking to go back to bare metal, which sounded unimaginable like 10, 15 years ago when all of us
Right.
were
Who would do
drinking
that?
the, who would do that? Why would you ever manage a data center again? There is a lot of change which happens on the infrastructure and teams throughout a company's life. And we are playing our small part in helping you stay abreast of your security needs and making sure that you're always compliant.
I like that. Why build this specifically for startups instead of the big enterprises? I mean, enterprises have a whole lot more money.
Mhm.
Startups, I mean, everybody needs it.
Yeah.
But what made you decide to go AI native from the start and then focus specifically on startups?
I think it goes back a lot to the journey you have as a founder. This is the third time I'm building a company. And one of the things that I have realized over those journeys is it is super important to enjoy the journey, because the outcomes are not necessarily in your control. As founders, we try our best to optimize the risks and have great outcomes for all the stakeholders, including ourselves. When I was working at Instabase, one of the things I realized is that I did not enjoy the very long procurement cycles with these massive companies, even though the contracts were highly valuable and the amount of impact we were having was massive. On the other hand, I have always really enjoyed working with early stage teams, and that's what gives me a very high amount of energy. And I would say that that was one of the primary things which led me to focus on early stage teams for the first segment that we are focusing on at CompliJet. Every conversation I have just fills me with energy. It does not feel like a sales conversation where I am depleted after a day of back to back conversations. I feel that, oh wow, I met 5 or 6 different founders and they are doing so many cool things, and I have an opportunity to be a small part of their journey. And that is already something which motivates and excites me so much. And it feels that, okay, I could be doing this and some of these people are going to pay me for letting me do this.
Yeah.
And that is very, very gratifying. So, yeah, over time, we absolutely would love to work with larger companies, mid market, and even enterprises. And we are building some of the platform capabilities with that future in mind. But for the first segment, we are super happy to solve the problems of these early stage companies and just going really deep on that.
I love that. And there's a real benefit to that. I mean, just what you said, the sales cycles are much faster. The impact is so much quicker. But then you really have the companies that are going to stay with you a long time. They start with you, and there's no reason to ever switch to anything else.
Absolutely. We hope to grow with the growing needs of these companies. It's something that a lot of other utility companies have built really well. For example, if you look at a company like Stripe, they chose to focus on a lot of fast growing startups, and they scaled really well with that customer base. Time will tell what will happen with CompliJet, but we already see some of our customers coming back and they are filling up these procurement forms and security questionnaires with mid-market and enterprise companies, and they are using our AI tools to automate the process of filling these security questionnaires. So we already see that they are leading us into what the product needs to evolve into. You mentioned PCI DSS earlier. That was a framework that we hadn't prioritized 6 months ago, but then a lot of our customers started asking for it. And then we ended up building that this quarter. It's a natural cycle where the platform will become more mature and evolve with the needs of these fast growing companies. Some of the churn is also inevitable because in this segment, not everyone will make it, but the people who do, they tend to have faster growth, and we can grow both from a platform as well as revenue point of view with them.
And this is one of those things that is a lever for growth. If you don't do it, you're probably not going to grow because, so many other companies, especially on the bigger side, mid-market enterprise for sure, are requiring certifications. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, don't just tell me you're compliant, but, show me a document that proves it. And so it's the companies that do that, they're the ones that really grow. And if they don't invest in something like this and do that, then the chances of that growth is significantly reduced.
Absolutely. That's one of the things which excites me the most. I've always been interested in building tools which will help other businesses grow and be a part of their sales cycle in some small way. And at ComplyJet, we absolutely are playing a role, whether it is helping you get audit ready or, as you mentioned, now in enterprise sales, especially in markets like North America, it has become table stakes to have a public-facing trust center where you can showcase your audit reports, your security policies, what are the controls that you're monitoring, and it reduces the friction in your procurement so much. Now, I've seen a massive shift in the last couple of years where it is actually almost everyone will be asking for your trust center as part of any sales process. And people who are investing into this, both the compliances and building these artifacts, they are a fundamental part of your GTM motion. This is not something that you can have as an afterthought.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's not something that you want to try and build as soon as it's requested. You need to have it before. And it has become table stakes for sure.
Absolutely. I see some teams who have built amazing products. They are really smart. And then they're scrambling at the last minute because prospect has asked for either their compliances. That's really unfortunate. And therefore, one of the advice I give to most of the founders is to understand this aspect of their prospects' buying criteria as well as validating some of the pain points that they're building for. People usually have a pretty good handle on who is their target persona, who do they need to talk to, and what's the value proposition they're representing. But a lot of the product builders who haven't been in the sales trenches in the past can overlook these aspects of the procurement process. And founders are learning very fast. They talk to each other, they understand what is required, and people are proactively investing in this.
Really, really good. So how do you help founders navigate? You SOC 2, I mentioned HIPAA, you just mentioned PCI DSS, ISO. This can be pretty intimidating stuff. How do you simplify that for early stage teams?
Absolutely. The primary battle for a lot of people is not even knowing where to start. And therefore, one of the design principles we have taken is to have a very prescriptive approach to what is really required in order to be ready for any security framework that people are asking for. Once people onboard onto the platform, we create a simple task-based view of all the things that they need to do. It looks very similar to a project management dashboard that they're familiar with on an Asana or a Jira. We are able to cut down a lot of the workflows by having our AI agents complete them. For example, when it comes to policy building, creating risk registers, doing access reviews, a lot of that stuff is automated for the people instead of some of the other platforms where you are still filling all of these workflows on the SaaS platform. And as people are going through it, they're also able to ask all their queries either to our AI copilot, which answers all of their questions. Something as mundane as, why do I need an asset management policy? or why do I need to figure out what to do if some asset needs to be recycled? These are all questions that no technical founder is an expert in, and you do not have a security or an IT manager to answer them for you. Making sure that people are always clear is a very important aspect of our offering, in addition to automating a lot of the workflows. Typically, people take about 15 to 20 hours of effort to get ready for their first audit with the early stage team. I have seen that when an enterprise deal is on the line, then founders make sure that all of that stuff is done as quickly as possible. Some of the teams have gotten ready in as less as a week for their SOC 2 audit with us. And otherwise, that stuff always becomes a P2 or a P3. There are always more customer requests or some other marketing initiatives that you are focusing on. I definitely see, especially first time founders, prioritizing it when a big deal or a prospect is on the line, and they then move really, really fast. The other thing that we have ensured is that folks have clarity throughout their audit experience itself. We have built up a network of auditors who are onboarded onto the platform. They're able to access all the evidence directly on the platform and have the communication with the teams directly there. We also help manage that process to make sure there are no negative surprises. We are able to close the gap as quickly as possible. For example, a lot of people gripe about, I haven't heard from my auditor in more than a week. It's the deal is hanging and people start getting really anxious. So we make sure that people always know when they are there in the process. And once they are proceeding through this, we make sure that we create a trust center for them in an automated manner, where all of the artifacts that we have created through this journey are populated. They're available on their website, and all the access requests from their prospects are also managed there. So these are the three jobs that we look to fundamentally solve for. How do we help people get ready for any framework? How do we make sure that the audit for that framework is as seamless as possible? And then how do we help you showcase your security posture to close more revenue with less friction? Bringing AI and white glove support for early stage teams with all the three jobs, Jeff.
It's really, really good. You've built a fairly lean team, and it's really smart in the way that you've built. But as you look out at other founders, there's always, the temptation to overhire, especially India, Asia more broadly, due to cost. What are the hiring traps you see founders fall into, and how are you approaching it differently? How do you think about that?
Yeah. I think as a founder, you're always looking for these dopamine hits of validation. And whether it is the first customer that you're closing, the first round that you have closed, or having a successful hire, like I have been through that process. And hiring can actually feel very similar to a sales process, where people who enjoy the chase, it can be really addictive to go after a lot of candidates and feel really successful when you are closing some of these people. The thing which I have seen though is, as you mentioned, the cost structure in Asia can look very different, and therefore it is even more easy to fall into the trap of overhiring early. If you do not have very high amount of clarity on what any new hire needs to do after they join you, it just creates a massive amount of overhead for you as a founder, where you are spending a lot of cycles with all those new people. And it is very easy for the motivation in the team to go down, because a lot of those people feel that they are not clear on how to add value and where they are going inside your team. And therefore, now I also think that as part of adopting AI technologies, it is really important to see what are all the things that you can automate in your own organization in addition to your product. I think a lot of people talk about how they're reimagining products, but I think it's equally important to reimagine what you can do in an organization. For example, we are doing almost all of our outreach using various SaaS tools or AI technologies. Even 3 years ago, I probably would have built up a BDR team of at least 3 or 4 people by now in order to have the same amount of outreach that we are doing now. And we see the same gains in every area, whether it is engineering, whether it is marketing. And therefore, now we have a very high bar on when to hire. And we prefer to have our dopamine hits from people who are coming as customers rather than celebrating the new hires or any funding round. So I think my philosophy as a founder and how to build a company has shifted quite a bit.
What if a leadership book and a Netflix drama had a baby? That is The Captain's Keys, Storms, Emotional Wreckage, and a surprisingly practical leadership system that one CEO called the owner's manual and never got for 20 years of leadership. Here is the brutal truth. You're probably drowning in LinkedIn connections while starving for real relationships. I hear it all the time. Most leaders are exhausted from playing the lone hero, and it's killing both your results and your sanity. The Captain's Keys reveals a new leadership framework, the stability matrix, four specific relationships that prevent burnout while multiplying your impact. And this isn't just theory. It's a system that I've used to scale companies and taught over 1,000 executive leaders. So grab your copy today at thecaptainskeys.com, Amazon, or choose your own adventure, print, ebook, or audio. Stop drowning alone and build your stability matrix. Now, that's very insightful. I love hearing how people are thinking about that, how they're tackling the challenge and growing smart.
Mhm.
And given where you are, you've had some pretty good VC offers that you've declined. You've got a great network. How do you evaluate when or maybe if to take on outside capital? What's your take?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have raised money from VCs before and have a good network both in US and Asia. It's very important to evaluate your own opportunity with an intellectually honest lens. As founders, it is very easy to oversell the opportunity to yourself while you're selling the opportunity to others. It is very easy to, we are constantly pitching. We are pitching to our family that this is going to be the best thing on the
Right.
earth. We are pitching to potential co-founders that you should totally drop that $1 million a year job and do this, and pitching to potential investors and employees to join. While you're doing that, sometimes it's very easy to overlook how hard it is to have really large scale venture outcomes if you're not building something which is very capital intensive. For example, if you are doing something very significant on AI infrastructure layer today, I would argue that you need a massive amount of capital even to have a shot to run the race. If you're doing something on the other side, on the application side, it is actually really easy to build a small offering and test it out without raising too much capital. As you prove out some of the initial hypotheses, the amount of conviction you have as a founder increases manyfold, and you have a lot more leverage in any discussion you have with potential investors. First of all, you have a lot more data, and if you're able to generate some amount of revenue, you are able to see a line of sight without necessarily having a lot of external capital, which can reduce the amount of pressure you have. Therefore, I have been very intentional about this time. We are able to invest some of our own capital, and we were able to build the platform without building a large team, and therefore haven't raised any institutional capital so far. There have been many offers which have been incoming. I always advise founders to have those conversations because they can be very insightful in understanding how some of these investors are evaluating your space or other competitors.
Yes.
Therefore, I still have these conversations. And as your business evolves, you may figure out, oh, we have very strong product market fit now, and I really want to press the pedal on growth, which may require you to spend a lot of money on marketing, or you want to build an army of AEs to go and capture that mid-market or enterprise market. And that would be a good time to perhaps go and raise money. And that's how we are thinking about it. Right now, we do not need any institutional capital, but this is not out of any ideology. A lot of people taking a lot of pride in being bootstrapped or talking about how VCs are evil. I think that is a very misguided view of the world.
Sure.
It's very important to be intentional and understand what's the business you're building and what the needs are from a capital perspective, and try and gain more leverage by having more clarity and making more progress than raising too early.
I think that's a big mistake because a lot of founders try and raise too early.
Mhm.
And if they can find that product market fit, they can start building revenue, then it puts them in a much better position to go out and raise. There's nothing wrong with raising. I love bootstrappers as well. You build differently, you build smart, but when you can build that, you're in a much better place. You're in a much better position to raise. You're telling a much better story. You have a much better chance of success, and you actually know how to use capital because you've done it really well up to that point
Mhm.
to get where you are. So I think there's a lot of advantages to that, but one is not right, one is not wrong. It's just they're different. And when you do that, when you do raise, you give up some control, you give up a little bit of your destiny and your roadmap.
Mhm.
It's not all up to you anymore, and
Absolutely.
that is a different place to be.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times in the early stages, you do not know how large a business can you really build in that category. It takes some
True.
time to understand the category, its dynamics, and find a place for yourself. There are a lot of amazing businesses to be built. Not all of them are venture scale. And as you pointed out, once you have raised the money, though, you are somewhat tied to chasing a large venture outcome. And I think that's
Right.
where a lot of the friction and what the different kind of pressures that founders can feel, that a lot of times they find themselves they're chasing growth too fast and in a way which is not optimized for their journey or their skill set. And that way they are compromising some of that optionality. Retaining that optionality by learning more about your own business, your customers, and how large a business can you really build in that category is a much better place to be when you are raising that external institutional capital.
How do you think about category? Is it a requirement to really build something that's category domination or create your own new category?
Mhm.
Or is there's some other middle ground? Or how do you think about that in how you're growing your business? Maybe has it changed since you've done this a few times? Has your view changed over time?
I think the view has become more nuanced over time. In the
I
beginning,
like that.
as a younger person, I definitely had a desire to build massive businesses, not necessarily from a wealth creation point of view, but just to build the largest player out there. And some of the categories can really be like that. For example, if you're building in a large consumer category, usually they do not support more than a few players at a time. And the price for being the third in a category is so small that it is not worthwhile in a lot of categories. The enterprise SaaS and software categories play very differently. It is really hard for any player to become so dominant to really drive majority of the revenue, and the procurement as well as the switching cycles of especially mid-market and enterprise companies are so different that even if you have a much better product, it can take you a long time, sometimes decades, to displace other products. One of the things that I have embraced over time is the power of compounding. How do you build an initial offering which is really important and solving a painkiller problem for your target segment? You gain their trust, you gain an entry in the door, and can you expand into other problems in adjacent areas over time? Because you're already cleared their procurement cycles, they trust you if you have delivered value. For example, in case of ComplyJet, we are focusing on security compliances as the first problem, but there are a lot of adjacent security workflows around this that we are very interested in. They may be something completely adjacent like filling a security questionnaire, but they may be more adjacent like things about doing an external vendor review or providing help when you are using other external software libraries or managing some incidents. Now, our chances of building in those categories improve if we deliver amazing value in security compliance for our initial customers. So now I think about not a single category. For example, I'm not only thinking about compliance automation as the category that we play in. I think there is a broader space around security and compliance and risk management that we are playing in. We are looking at an initial segment and an initial problem in that. And over time, we want to expand on that area. And if you look from a buyer's perspective, like people are really tired and exhausted of using hundreds of different SaaS tools. And there is a lot of consolidation going on. You can see that happen in the GTM space where large players are buying each other out to create a full suite of solutions. And I expect you can see that happening in security space more broadly as well. And I think, especially for SaaS founders, it is important to think about other problems that you can build upon and build a compounding startup, if you want to say, rather than focus too much on the initial category that you're beginning with.
That's good. How do you stay disciplined in, specifically in product focus? You're talking about here, you're serving a wide base and kind of thinking, you're looking at adjacent problems and adjacent markets.
Yeah.
How do you stay focused and disciplined? What are your guardrails for saying no?
I think not having external capital is an excellent guardrail because you do not have too many resources at all. You have very little team and very little amount of capital on the marketing. I think I see a lot of the discipline issues come up when you have a lot of resources, and
Yes.
that can be really, really hard to handle. Most of the people, in my experience, mistake how hard building a single GTM motion is. For example, we are very clear that we are only focused on early stage teams right now, and we are not looking at mid stage or enterprise companies. I went through this journey at Instabase where we had built an enterprise motion successfully, and we were building a PLG motion after that. And building that was as tough, and it took us a long time to start building that, build a content marketing machine and have a product surface which could support a truly PLG motion. I think it is really important to focus very heavily on the motion that you're already executing, the problem that you're chasing, and look at, are you already the world's best at doing that, both from a product as well as a GTM perspective. We are very far away from being the world's best at both the product and GTM. There is a lot more for us to do. I think the second lens, which is sometimes harder, is a lot of times customers are asking you to expand your product. They have other problems that they want to solve. And how do you say no to that? There can be a real sense of fear that they may go to another vendor and you may get displaced over time. I think in that case, we definitely look at how repeatable a certain problem comes across. I do not commit to any problem the first time I come across that from either a customer or prospects. But if I've heard the same thing a few different times, we have a serious relook at our priorities. I think a tactical advice here can be to not be too tied to your roadmaps, which is a problem you can have, especially when you are in a mid-sized team. You already have something which is you have been grooming for a long time. You go into a roadmap prioritization session, whereas an early stage team can actually have the agility to say, the ideas we had 6 months ago, they are not necessarily better than what we have them today. Why don't we take a fresh look at everything? And that is one of the advantages team can have, to really look at what are the signals that we have gone from our market, and do we want to continue focusing on our existing problem set and our existing GTM motion, or do we really want to expand? And I think sometimes people can go against the data, but you better have a very strong reason or very strong conviction on what you're choosing to build if you want to increase the stakes. And you do not get to play the founder card too many times. You need to be careful on when you choose to exercise that, if you are bucking the data and what the team is telling you.
Thanks again, Varun, for coming on the show and sharing your insights and resources. You can learn more about Varun and ComplyJet at complyjet.com. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well. We've got lots of resources over there for you. And thought leaders share. Share this episode with a teammate who treats annual planning like a mix of spreadsheets, hope, and seasonal delusion. Everyone who shares this week gets a solution generator that replaces work-life balance with slightly fewer meetings and considers that a massive personal win. Drowning in task, email, and never-ending to-do lists? Well, our New Year's episode is super special. We have Leslie Shreve, founder and CEO of Productive Day. She's with us to unpack taskology, the science of getting things done. She helps executives reclaim hours every day through taskology. Leslie reveals how leaders can increase productivity by up to 300%, slash inbox time in half, and reduce stress without complicated systems or burnout. Really excited to kick off the year that way. And who could use a little less time in their inbox, right? Well, coming up the following Tuesday, Chris Carter, founder of Aproyo, shares how his team manages over 1,000 SAP environments worldwide, why specialization beats generalization in enterprise services, and what it really takes to guide companies through complex SAP migrations, especially in the move to S/4HANA. Well, I will see you next time, and it will be a brand new year, 2026. So happy new year in advance. And as always, enjoy the journey. 2026 is going to be amazing. We'll see you there.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSFuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.